Good morning. We are here in FTP 24, the International Congress of Physiotherapy that we organize here in Barcelona. And it's a pleasure to have international speakers that they have a long trajectory, they have a interesting point of view. And well, Ann Coles, welcome to the FTP International Congress. She's associate professor in the University of Ghent in Belgium, if I'm not wrong. Later on, you can explain a little bit your professional trajectory. We have also the pleasure to share with Jenny McConnell. She's a physiotherapist in private practice in Sydney, Australia, and she's also a member of the College of Physiotherapy in Australia. Briefly, each one of you, can you explain your trajectory in physiotherapy, just to getting the picture of your trajectory in physiotherapy, please? Jenny, if you want.
Okay. I have had a fabulous career in physiotherapy. I started working in a hospital when I first graduated, which gave me good experience in looking at everything in physiotherapy. We provided 24-hour coverage to the hospital, so you actually had to know what you were doing at 3 o'clock in the morning if you were called out to treat a baby that was in neonatal intensive care. That actually then really made me decide that perhaps chest physiotherapy was not my direction in life. I then, in my mid-20s, did my manipulative therapy degree, and in that degree, I then was looking at why people develop patellofemoral pain, and I had a prediction equation to actually look at why some people got pain and some didn't, looking at a whole bunch of variables. So when I tried to present that at a conference, people said, "Oh, no, they grow out of it and don't worry about it. And, what you've got to do is make treatment better." So it made me start looking at treatment. And so I was very fortunate in a sort of I suppose, serendipitous moment. I was holding people's patellas as they were going up and down the steps and thinking, how can I make this a bit better? Looked in the cupboard because I'd inherited a clinic from someone on campus at the college, and actually found some tape. Only reason it worked was it was old. So that's what started the sort of trajectory through into patellofemoral pain and taping patellas and looking at specific exercises. I presented at a conference for manipulative physiotherapists when I was in my late 20s, where it was mainly spines and mobilization, and I was talking about a knee and exercises and taping, and I thought I'd be yelled out of the room, but I wasn't. And so it was really quite successful. People wanted to know about it, and I was extremely fortunate because people around the world also wanted to know about it because the treatment wasn't very good at that time. And then I did a biomedical engineering degree that I was looking at what tape actually did and how it changed muscle force. And from there, I started looking at other joints and looking at the whole concept of where we start from and how it enables people to move better. And I think as a physio, what we have to realize is we are hope generators. We give patients hope. And I think that's a really important thing for physios of today to realize, that we, of all the medical professions, do generate that hope. And
I think it's a very good message for selling us as a physiotherapist.
And not to say, "Oh, well, bad luck, you've got wear and tear." You say, "No, we can do things for you," which is really great.
Let me ask now, Anne, about your professional trajectory, if you can explain briefly a little bit.
So I graduated in 86, and then I started for 10 years as a clinical physiotherapist in my own practice together with my husband. But during these years already, I felt that teaching was something that I really loved. So I started to teach in 93, and in 98, I got the opportunity to make a PhD together with teaching at the university. So my PhD was on the role of the scapula in shoulder pain, and I was very fortunate that I could stay after my PhD, becoming an associate and now full professor at the university. So I work there since 1998, a very long time. And over the years, we developed with several PhD students, we developed several research lines, all in the broad area of shoulder rehab. My scapular line was the oldest one, and now I've finished it. The final PhD, we finished that in 23. We have a line on instability, specifically multidirectional shoulder instability. We have a sporting shoulder line, which is probably the biggest one, with several focuses. At this time, we focus mostly on physical performance tests and return to play. I also have a tendinopathy line together with the University of Copenhagen, and my youngest research line is the older shoulder, as I just presented, with degenerative rotator cuff tears and shoulder pathesis. So I'm very happy throughout the years that the ideas from our team led to good papers, but also to good messages for clinicians, because just like Jenny was saying, it's so important that you can spread the news, not only in a journal, but also to people who are interested of learning more, and a combination of science and clinical practice.
I think this is a very important thing related to physiotherapy, because we started without, maybe 40 years ago or 50 years ago, without any research in physiotherapy, but there were a boom in research, but sometimes this research was far from the clinical practice, no? And to look for a way in where we can translate the results of research to the clinical practice is something that is very important. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's our mission.
Yeah.
We should translate research to the clinic and not bother them too much with statistical data and significances, but saying, okay, as a clinician, you can use this result in your daily practice from the start. And I think that's one of our major tasks, to bring it to the clinic, and so that you don't have two worlds.
Yeah, it's very important for clinicians to be able to use information that's found in research and not feel that it's not appropriate for their patients, because basically they want to get their patients better.
Yeah. And how we can do the translation, no, from the research to the clinic. And in your countries, for example, in Australia, there is any support from the Australian Association of Physiotherapy that helps the clinicians to take the information from the research groups to the clinics, or how do you work with this?
I mean, it's interesting at the moment. I think what's happened in physiotherapy in Australia is, I think we've been burdened by evidence-based, and a lot of treatments, unfortunately, don't stack up with the evidence base. I was on a recent Medicare review panel looking at evidence base for just conservative management, and that included chiropractic, a whole bunch of others, and it doesn't really stack up, which is very unfortunate. So that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, nothing works. And I think what has happened in a lot of the physio schools in Australia is they're saying, well, you know, that treatment doesn't work because there's no evidence that it works, and which is extremely
it's a pity.
A bad direction that physiotherapists are taking. And so we're now into the psychosocial, which is also, you know, a bit of a problem as well. But that's, anyway.
I think we come from far, indeed, from no evidence to when I was actually doing my studies in Leuven, we were taught to treat a joint or a muscle, but never to treat a patient. And then the patient took over, which is good, but it can also go too much in that direction. So now we have to become coaches and get around psychosocial components. But it's a good evolution. But everything in physiotherapy works in waves. So we always have hypes, and then everyone needs to do that. And we have to indeed not throw away the baby with the bathwater. And at the end, we keep there was a time in 2018, the conference of IFONT was all about chronic pain and central sensitization. So keep your hands off, in a manual therapy conference. So it was also hype. So I think we had to keep the good things.
Well, it's like a panel, no? Have to be evidence-based, and well, it doesn't make so much sense, no?
But the definition of evidence-based practice is three things. It's the evidence, it's your patient's characteristics, and it's your own clinical expertise. Yeah. And that's equally important as the research. And I always say that when I teach to people who are already working.
And I think the problem is that people have forgotten that there is a science in physiotherapy, but there's also an art. And that art is something that's very hard to measure, and how one person will respond to a treatment and how one therapist does a treatment is completely different. And it's very hard to actually say, well, everybody does the same thing and this is the response, because the art is hard to measure. And we can never underestimate how important the art is.
Absolutely, I agree with this. I think it's important, and sometimes the difficulty is to translate this to translate to the students that it's not only the evidence, the results that you have on a paper. You have to be a clinician to touch patients, to feel that the patient is receiving that they need really, not only the protocol that is established by the government or the hospital. Is very important. Regarding all of this information, just for not getting a long interview, what are your opinion or your ideas or the strategic lines that we have to follow as a physiotherapist to do a better physiotherapy in the future, no? Because they have different spheres of the physiotherapy, the clinician or the practical one, the research, the education, but how is the way in where we can put everything together and improve the physiotherapy in general?
Well, I'm going to say a Dutch saying now because I don't know it in English. Schoenmaker blijft bij released. So we have to make sure that we don't lose our skill set.
I agree.
Yeah. So, and our skill set is particular. It's partially art, it's partially knowledge, it's partially practical skills. And we have to make sure that we don't lose that. And with the current tendency of being coaching and all the hands-off, we are losing that.
And that is so true, because with that hands-off and psychosocial, if we're not putting our hands on the patient, somebody else will, and we'll lose our ability to treat the patient. And often some of the psychosocial stuff comes out when you put your hands on. The very important thing you have as a physio is you do have a license to touch. And that license to touch enables you to listen and hear and really help that patient sort of navigate what's going on in their lives. If you take that away, then it really is problematic. And I think that's where we're headed, unfortunately, at the moment, certainly in Australia, which worries me intensely. When I do workshops in Australia at the moment, a lot of them are disillusioned. The young people are, not going to stay in the profession. I think the retention rate is only about 8 years, which is terrible.
It's the same in Belgium.
Yeah. And you feel difference between the youngers and the older physios?
Well, I think by nature, the younger generation is not exactly the same as the older ones. So the work-life balance is different than what we did, which is okay. I think they also have not the patience that we had. So we were more patient in saying, okay, we have to develop that. It needs time. Now they want to be the best before they are 30. But there is definitely a change in generation. They will not work every day until 10 o'clock in the evening.
No.
Do you think there is a solution to change this way to
experience
and education probably in the universities, no?
Well, the good thing about education now, when I compare it what I saw, was in my time it was like dogmatic. This is what you learn because that's what's in the books. And I think at this moment, it will be the same. We really try to put experts in the education. So I will not teach about knees because I'm not an expert in knees. I'm only an expert in shoulders. That's what I teach. And that makes it sometimes harder for students because they get information on a level that is much higher. But also you can share your expertise with the clinic. And that's maybe because you were asking, how do you bring it to the public? When I have to do a presentation on a scientific meeting, it will not be the same as what I do here. Here there are movies with exercises and immediately you see everyone making a movie because they want to use it tomorrow. Maybe not tomorrow, but next week in the practice. And I don't give numbers because they're not interested.
No. It is very important to make sure it's applicable so that a clinician can treat Mrs. Smith on Monday. So it's very important. But how you get that translation from a younger generation, I think sometimes they think treatment is very prescriptive and the clinical reasoning is gone. They're not looking at the whole patient. They're not looking at some of the causes of the issues and they want a quick solution. And I think that's what makes physiotherapy very interesting, that it is such a diverse profession, and people are so involved and interesting with their problems that,
maybe because it's so easy, no? You look only the problem and not
they won't do. You do need to look globally, and you do need to think about, how this will affect that, and where an issue may be. It may be far away from where the pain is, but you can actually, if you improve that whole area, the patient will perform better.
And the whole issue of clinical reasoning, I think we did it more with our gut feeling. We pay a lot of attention to clinical reasoning in the education now, because otherwise they are lost. They don't see the flags. They don't see, is there tissue damage or not? So we really have kind of structure where we go over a list with things that are important in their clinical reasoning. And I think over time they will do it automatically. I think also the combination of being a clinician ourselves together with a researcher, all my research questions came from the clinic. When I do this, how am I sure that I do it right? Well, let's put a study on it.
And I think that's amazing, because you do need people that are in clinical practice who are doing research because they know that it works. If you have people that are educating students and they've never treated a patient, they don't know what they're talking about.
And it exists. So.
It's really far from the reality.
Oh, yeah. And it's all well and good for you to say, well, you do this, but in practice, does it work? And how do you modify it? And what are you going to do?
Maybe the paper supports this.
Yeah. And you do need the nuances. And I think that's what, if you're working in clinical practice, you can give that to students. But I am a little bit concerned about where physiotherapy is going. I am concerned.
Okay.
Because
any suggestion for changing this?
Well, like Anne, I think we can't lose our skill set. I mean, we are so privileged to have that skill set, so we can't let it go. I mean, Anne said it quite succinctly. It's very important.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your opinions. It's very, very fantastic. I think that we exchange a lot of information and background that you accumulate during your career, your experience. It's so nice. I think it's also a message that we can give to the youngers and to the physiotherapy community in general. It's important also for us. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jenny, and a pleasure for being sharing with you the Congress.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you.